"She will never look good in a gown," mocked the Hell's Angel biker, but fell silent when she arrived. That's what they said the first time this scarred young woman walked into their town, trembling, hungry, and just trying to stay invisible. They thought she was running from one bad man, but she was running from all of them, a whole biker gang that stole everything she ever loved. But then came the night of their giant gala, the night the world expected her to disappear. Instead, she walked in wearing a simple white gown that stunned the entire room. Because she didn't come to hide, she came to expose their darkest secrets. And when the biker who mocked her saw her again, he finally realized she wasn't weak, she was dangerous, and she was done running. But with the gang closing in and the truth threatening to explode, what happens when the one woman they tried to break becomes the only one who can destroy them? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The rising sun painted Red Mesa's weathered buildings in shades of amber and gold as Maya Boone's tired sedan limped into the parking lot of Mama Joe's diner. The car's engine coughed and rattled, protesting the long night drive through the desert. Maya's fingers, white-knuckled on the steering wheel, finally relaxed their death grip as she pulled into an empty space. Through the diner's wide windows, she could see the morning crowd inside. Truckers hunched over steaming coffee cups, locals chatting over plates piled with eggs and hash browns. It looked safe enough, normal enough. Maybe here she could just be another face in the crowd. Maya's reflection in the rear-view mirror made her wince. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her long brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She touched the scar that ran along her jaw, a permanent reminder of why she could never let her guard down. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her worn backpack from the passenger seat and stepped out into the dry desert air. The bell above the diner's door chimed as she entered. The smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around her like a warm blanket, but her moment of comfort shattered as she noticed them. The group of Hell's Angels gathered around a corner booth. Their leather vests were decorated with patches and pins, marking their territory and rank. Maya's heart stumbled in her chest. She chose a seat at the counter, as far from them as possible, keeping her head down and shoulders hunched. But she could feel their eyes on her, studying her like predators sizing up prey. The scars, the way her hands trembled as she picked up a menu, the fear she tried so hard to hide. "Well, well," a gravelly voice cut through the diner's morning chatter. "Look what the desert wind blew in." Brick Haldeman's words carried across the room like a whip crack. He was the biggest of the group, his muscled arms covered in faded tattoos, his face weathered and cruel. Maya recognized his type immediately, the kind of man who fed on others' fear. "She will never look good in a gown," he announced with a smirk that turned her stomach. His words drew snickers from his companions, but the rest of the diner fell into an uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that screamed of people wanting to help but being too afraid to act. Maya's cheeks burned hot with shame and anger, but she kept her eyes fixed on the laminated menu, though the words blurred before her. She'd learned long ago that responding only made things worse. Just breathe. Just endure. Just survive. A shadow fell across her menu, and Maya flinched before realizing it was just the waitress, a sturdy woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Don't you pay them any mind, honey," the woman said softly, her name tag identifying her as Mama Joe. "What can I get you this morning?" Maya's voice came out barely above a whisper. I was actually wondering if you might have any work available. Just temporary. I can wash dishes, clean, anything really." Mama Joe studied her face for a long moment, seeing past the facade to the desperation beneath. "First things first," she said firmly. "You need a hot meal in you. When's the last time you ate, child?" Maya couldn't remember. The realization must have shown on her face because Mama Joe clicked her tongue and turned toward the kitchen. "I'm bringing you my special breakfast plate on the house. We can talk about work after you've got some food in your stomach." Tears pricked at Maya's eyes at the unexpected kindness, but she blinked them back. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Not here, not now. The bikers were still watching, still waiting for any sign of vulnerability. When the food arrived, eggs, bacon, pancakes, and hash browns arranged in a generous heap, Maya forced herself to eat slowly, despite her hunger. Each bite was a small battle against the nausea of fear churning in her stomach. Finally, unable to bear the weight of eyes on her any longer, Maya stepped outside to catch her breath. The morning air had warmed considerably, and heat rippled off the asphalt of the parking lot. She leaned against the building's sun-warmed brick, trying to still her trembling hands. What she didn't notice was the man watching her from across the lot, leaning against a heavy-duty tow truck. Matthew Briggs had seen it all: her arrival, the biker's taunts, the way she carried herself like someone expecting a blow. He recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it too many times in his former life. His jaw tightened as he made a silent decision. Whatever she was running from, whatever had brought her to Red Mesa, she shouldn't have to face it alone. The desert wind kicked up, sending dust devils dancing across the parking lot as Maya stood there, trying to gather her courage to go back inside. She had no idea that in this moment, in this dusty parking lot outside a roadside diner, someone had already chosen to become her ally in whatever storm was coming. The desert sun had barely cleared the horizon when Maya pushed open the diner's door again. Her neck ached from sleeping twisted in her car's front seat, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. The bell's gentle chime announced her presence, drawing Mama Joe's immediate attention from behind the counter. "There you are, honey," Mama Joe called out warmly. "I was hoping you'd come back." Maya's fingers twisted nervously at the hem of her wrinkled shirt. "I wanted to thank you properly for yesterday's meal. I know it wasn't—" "None of that now," Mama Joe interrupted, waving away Maya's words. "Come sit. Have you met Matthew yet?" She gestured toward a broad-shouldered man seated at the counter, steam rising from the coffee mug in front of him. Maya tensed instinctively, but something in his quiet demeanor made her pause. His hands were work-worn, grease embedded in the creases of his knuckles, but they held his cup with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size. "Matthew Briggs," he introduced himself, his voice low and steady. "I run the repair shop down the street." Maya nodded cautiously, sliding onto a stool with one empty space between them. Mama Joe set a fresh cup of coffee in front of her without asking, the porcelain warm against Maya's cold fingers. "That your sedan out there?" Matthew asked, gesturing towards the parking lot. "Couldn't help but notice it was running pretty rough yesterday." Maya's grip tightened on her cup. "It gets me where I need to go." "Most days, maybe," Matthew said, his tone careful and non-confrontational. "But that timing belt's about ready to go. I can hear it from here." Her eyes snapped to his face, surprise momentarily overwhelming her caution. Most people wouldn't have picked up on that specific sound. Matthew's expression remained neutral, but there was understanding in his eyes. "I've got space in the shop this morning if you'd like me to take a look," he offered. "Could use some help around there too, if you're still looking for work." Maya glanced at Mama Joe, who gave an encouraging nod. "Matthew's good people," the older woman assured her. "Known him 15 years now." After a long moment, Maya nodded. "I could help clean up, maybe. Sort tools." "Let's start there then," Matthew agreed, standing slowly to avoid any sudden movements. He left money on the counter for his breakfast, nodding his thanks to Mama Joe. The walk to the garage was short, just 3 buildings down from the diner. Matthew's shop occupied an old brick building with wide, rolling doors, the morning sun glinting off the chrome of a tow truck parked outside. Inside, the space was organized chaos. Tools lined the walls in careful order, but parts and projects filled every available surface. "It's not much," Matthew admitted, "but it keeps the town's vehicles running." He showed her. Around, the main work area, the small office, the break room with its ancient coffee maker and mini-fridge. "Start wherever you're comfortable. Tools always need cleaning and sorting." Maya picked up a wrench, her hands automatically finding the proper grip. Matthew noticed but didn't comment, simply continuing his morning routine of opening up the shop. As the morning wore on, Maya's true knowledge began to show through despite her attempts to hide it. When Matthew struggled with a stubborn bolt on an old pickup's transmission, she quietly suggested using a specific size socket with a breaker bar instead of the wrench he held. When a customer's car came in making an unusual noise, her head tilted slightly at the sound, recognition flashing across her face before she could mask it. By mid-afternoon, Matthew had stopped pretending not to notice. "You know engines," he stated simply, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Maya stiffened but didn't deny it. "I picked things up here and there." "More than picked up," he responded. "That's professional knowledge, training." She turned away, organizing tools that were already perfectly arranged. "Sometimes knowledge is better kept quiet." Matthew was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah," he finally agreed. "Sometimes it is." He didn't push further, instead showing her how he liked the diagnostic equipment stored and maintained. The sun was setting when Matthew finally closed up the shop, casting long shadows across the oil-stained concrete floor. "Let me walk you back to the diner," he offered, locking up the main doors. Maya hesitated, glancing toward the street where her car waited. Matthew followed her gaze, understanding dawning in his eyes. "There's a cot in the break room," he said carefully. "Clean sheets in the cabinet. Not much, but it's warm. Safer than sleeping in your car in the desert night." The word safer made Maya's shoulders tense, but she couldn't argue with the truth of it. The desert nights were cold, and her car's heater barely worked. After a long internal struggle, she nodded. Matthew showed her where to find the sheets and spare blankets, then handed her a key to the side door. "Lock up behind me," he instructed. "I'll be back around 7 tomorrow morning." Once alone, Maya carefully made up the cot, her movements precise and practiced as someone used to making temporary spaces livable. The break room was small but clean, with a solid door she could lock and a window high enough that no one could easily look in. For the first time in days, she felt her muscles begin to relax. The exhale that escaped her lips was almost a sob of relief, until the distinctive rumble of motorcycle engines shattered the quiet night. Maya bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs as the sound grew louder, then faded as the bikes passed the shop. She pressed herself into the corner, waiting in the darkness until the last echoes died away. Red Mesa was supposed to be far enough. It was supposed to be safe. But as Maya huddled on the cot, every muscle coiled tight with tension. She realized that maybe there wasn't anywhere far enough to outrun what she was running from. The desert sun rose hot and bright over Red Mesa, turning the morning sky into a canvas of orange and pink. Maya had woken early, her body still attuned to a life that demanded constant vigilance. She'd made coffee in the ancient break room machine, its gurgling sounds oddly comforting in the quiet garage. When Matthew arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, he found her already organizing the day's work orders. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, but didn't comment on them. Instead, he handed her a paper bag from Mama Joe's. "Breakfast," he said simply. "Can't work on empty." The morning settled into a rhythm of small repairs, oil changes, brake checks, and minor fixes that kept the town's vehicles running. Maya stayed in the background, passing tools when needed and cleaning up after each job. But her knowledge showed through in subtle ways. The slight shake of her head when a customer described their engine trouble incorrectly, the way her hands automatically reached for the right tool before Matthew could ask. Around noon, Matthew suggested they break for lunch at the diner. Maya's initial instinct was to refuse, but her stomach growled traitorously at the thought of Mama Joe's cooking. The walkover was quiet, the desert heat making the air shimmer above the pavement. The diner was unusually crowded for mid-afternoon, with clusters of people gathered around the small television mounted in the corner. The usual chatter was subdued, replaced by an anticipatory hush as the local news played. "Turn it up," someone called, and the volume increased just as the newscaster's voice filled the room. "In breaking news, the town of Red Mesa has been chosen to host this year's Hells Angels annual Brotherhood Gala," the reporter announced cheerfully. "This prestigious event is expected to bring hundreds of motorcycle enthusiasts to our small town, providing a significant boost to local businesses." The clatter of Maya's fork hitting her plate cut through the excited murmurs. Her face had drained of all color, making the scar on her cheek stand out starkly against her pale skin. Her hands, usually so steady with tools, trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. Mama Joe, who had been refilling coffee cups nearby, paused. Her experienced eyes took in Maya's rigid posture, the way her breathing had become shallow and quick. Without drawing attention, she moved closer, positioning herself between Maya and the rest of the diner's curious patrons. "Honey," Mama Joe said softly, "why don't you take your plate to the back? It's quieter there." Maya couldn't speak, but she managed a tiny nod. As she slipped away from the table, Matthew watched her go, his expression troubled. He waited a respectful amount of time before following, finding her in Mama Joe's small office, her untouched, plate cold on the desk. He settled into the spare chair, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "The bikers on TV," he said carefully. "Are they connected to the ones who were in here yesterday? The ones who tried to intimidate you?" Maya's fingers twisted together in her lap. She stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. "I can't," she started, then stopped. After a long moment, she tried again. "I don't feel safe here anymore." The words seemed to cost her greatly, each one dragged out against her will. Matthew nodded, understanding both what she said and what she couldn't say. "No one would blame you for leaving," he offered quietly. Maya's laugh was bitter and without humor. "Leaving isn't always as simple as just driving away." The rest of the meal passed in silence. When Matthew had to return to the garage for an afternoon appointment, Maya insisted on walking back alone, needing space to think. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as she paced between the tool benches and half-finished repairs. Her footsteps echoed in the empty garage, each circuit bringing her no closer to a solution. Red Mesa had seemed perfect, small enough to disappear in, far enough from her old life to feel safe. But now that life was coming here, bringing with it all the dangers she'd fled from. As darkness fell, Maya's pacing finally led her to her car. The old sedan sat quietly in the shadow of the garage, holding the last piece of her past she couldn't leave behind. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the trunk and reached deep into the spare tire well, pulling out a small metal box. The box was unremarkable, the kind you might keep spare change or old photographs in. But as Maya held it tightly against her chest, her knuckles white with tension, She knew its contents were worth killing for. Inside lay evidence that could bring down not just a few corrupt bikers, but an entire network of criminal operations. She sank down onto the concrete floor, her back against the car's wheel, the box heavy in her hands. The garage's security light cast weird shadows around her, and every distant sound made her tense. Maya knew she couldn't stay in Red Mesa much longer. The risk was too great. But leaving now, with hundreds of bikers about to descend on the town, felt impossible. Every road would be watched, every escape route monitored. The metal box grew warm in her grip as she held it, a tangible reminder of why she could never stop running. Inside this simple container lay the reason those bikers wanted her dead, and now they were bringing their entire organization to her doorstep. The sunrise painted Red Mesa in shades of pink and gold, but Maya hadn't slept to see the night end. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she pushed open the diner's door, the little bell's cheerful jingle at odds with her exhaustion. The early morning air still held its desert chill, and she hugged her arms around herself as she slipped into her usual corner booth. Only a few regulars occupied the diner at this hour. An elderly couple shared toast and coffee near the window, and a truck driver dozed over his empty plate at the counter. The familiar scent of coffee and fresh-baked biscuits filled the air, but even that couldn't calm Maya's frayed nerves. Mama Jo emerged from the kitchen, her keen eyes taking in Maya's disheveled appearance. Without a word, she poured 2 cups of coffee and settled into the booth across from her. The vinyl seat creaked softly as she sat. "You look like you've been wrestling with demons all night, child," Mama Jo said quietly, sliding 1 cup toward Maya. Maya wrapped her trembling fingers around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because of the news about the gala?" Mama Jo's tone was gentle, but her eyes were sharp and knowing. The words hung between them as Maya stared into her coffee. Finally, she nodded, a single tear splashing into the dark liquid. "I thought I was safe here," she whispered. "I thought I'd run far enough." Mama Jo reached across the table, her weathered hand covering Maya's. "Sometimes running isn't the answer, even when it feels like the only choice we have." The simple touch of compassion broke something in Maya. Tears began falling faster, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Mama Jo waited patiently, her hand steady and warm over Maya's cold fingers. "I stole something," Maya finally confessed, her voice breaking. "From the gang. A hard drive full of evidence. Their whole operation, everything they've done, everyone they've hurt. I couldn't let them keep hurting people." Mama Jo's grip tightened slightly, but her expression remained calm. "That took incredible courage, Maya." Maya shook her head. "It wasn't courage, I was desperate. She touched the scar on her cheek unconsciously. "They were going to kill me anyway. I figured I might as well die for something that mattered." "But you didn't die," Mama Jo pointed out softly. "You survived. You're stronger than you believe." "Am I?" Maya's laugh was bitter. "I've been running for months, sleeping in my car, jumping at shadows. That's not strength." "Strength isn't about never being afraid," Mama Jo said firmly. "It's about facing that fear and choosing to go on anyway. You've done that every single day." They sat in silence for a while, the diner slowly filling with the breakfast crowd. Maya sipped her coffee, letting Mama Jo's words sink in. When she finally looked up, something had shifted in her eyes, a tiny spark of determination where there had been only fear before. As evening approached, Maya found herself alone in the garage's small bathroom. She'd retrieved a garment bag from her car's trunk, handling it with a mixture of reverence and pain. Inside was her wedding gown, the dress she'd never gotten to wear on her big day. With shaking hands, she unzipped the bag. The dress was simple, but elegant. Ivory silk that flowed like water, with delicate lace at the shoulders and hem. She'd chosen it because it made her feel beautiful, before Brick and his gang had stolen that feeling from her. Maya slipped the dress over her head, the familiar fabric settling against her skin. She smoothed it down with trembling fingers, then slowly raised her eyes to the mirror. The woman who stared back at her was both familiar and strange. The scar on her cheek stood out, yes, but it didn't diminish her beauty. Instead, it seemed to highlight her resilience. The dress still fit perfectly, highlighting her strength rather than her vulnerability. Tears began falling as she gazed at her reflection. But these weren't tears of shame or fear. They were tears of recognition, of remembering who she had been before the gang had tried to break her. The dress represented everything they had tried to take from her: her dignity, her future, her sense of self. Standing there in her wedding gown, surrounded by tools and motor oil, Maya felt something fierce awakening inside her. Brick's cruel words from the diner echoed in her mind. She will never look good in a gown. But he was wrong. She looked beautiful, and more importantly, she looked strong. A plan began forming in her mind, not one born of fear, but of determination. The gala would bring hundreds of bikers to Red Mesa, including the very men she'd been running from. Instead of hiding, she would face them. She would walk into their celebration wearing this very gown, forcing them to see her, to acknowledge what they'd tried to destroy. With careful movements, Maya removed the dress and folded it back into its garment bag. Her hands were steady now as she zipped it closed, her mind clear for the first time in months. "I'm done running," she whispered to herself, and the words felt like a promise. In the growing darkness outside, crickets began their evening song. Through the bathroom window, Maya could see the first stars appearing in the desert sky. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had found something stronger, the courage to stand her ground and fight back. The desert sun had barely crept over the horizon when Maya made her way to Mama Joe's diner, clutching her garment bag close. The morning air still held its nighttime chill, making her pull her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. She paused at the diner's back door, taking a deep breath before knocking. Mama Joe answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "You're up early, sugar," she said warmly, ushering Maya inside. The kitchen was already warm from the morning's baking, filled with the comforting smell of fresh bread and coffee. "I was hoping," Maya began hesitantly, "I could use your back room. The gown needs some small repairs, and I remembered seeing your sewing machine." "Say no more," Mama Joe interrupted with a smile. She led Maya through the kitchen to a small room behind it, where sunlight streamed through a dusty window. "Let me get my sewing kit. That old machine hasn't seen much use lately, but she still runs just fine." While Mama Joe disappeared to fetch her supplies, Maya carefully unzipped the garment bag. In the morning light, the ivory silk seemed to glow. She ran her fingers over a loose seam at the shoulder, then found a few small tears that needed attention. Mama Joe returned with a wooden box full of thread, needles, and scissors. "Here we go," she said, setting it down on the small table. "Do you need any help?" Maya shook her head. "I used to help my grandmother with her alterations business. I remember enough to manage these repairs." For the next hour, Maya worked steadily, her fingers remembering old skills as she carefully mended the damaged areas. The familiar motion of needle and thread was soothing, helping to calm her nerves about what was to come. The bell over the diner's front door chimed regularly as the morning crowd began arriving, but Maya stayed focused on her task. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice Matthew's arrival until he appeared in the doorway, holding a paper cup of coffee. "I brought you," he started, then stopped short when he saw the wedding gown spread across the table. His expression shifted from surprise to understanding, and finally to concern. "You're planning to wear this to the gala?" It wasn't a question, but Maya nodded anyway. "Yes," she said simply, meeting his eyes with quiet determination. Matthew set the coffee down and pulled up a chair. "Maya, are you sure about this? Those men, they're dangerous." "I know exactly how dangerous they are," she replied, her fingers tracing the scar on her cheek. "That's why I have to do this. I can't keep running forever." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Wait here," he said, standing up suddenly. "I'll be right back." Maya watched curiously as he hurried out to his truck. When he returned, he was carrying a shoebox. "I noticed your shoes were falling apart," he explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "I picked these up yesterday. They should go well with the dress." Maya opened the box to find a pair of simple white heels, elegant but sturdy enough to run in if needed. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to her eyes. "Matthew, Try them on," he encouraged gently. They fit perfectly. Maya blinked back tears as she looked up at him. "Thank you." Later that afternoon, the three of them gathered at a corner booth in the empty diner between lunch and dinner service. Mama Jo had brought coffee and her famous apple pie, but Maya was too nervous to eat. "Let's go over everything again," Matthew said, spreading out a rough sketch of the venue on the table. "The gala's being held at the old community center. I'll park my truck here." He pointed to a spot near the side entrance, where I can see both doors. "I'll be inside," Mama Jo added. "They asked me to help with the catering. I'll keep an eye on things from the kitchen." Maya traced the path she would take from the main entrance to the center of the room. "I'll wait until most people are inside. Then I'll walk in through these doors, right when they're doing their welcome speech." "If anything feels wrong," Matthew stressed, "anything at all, you head straight for my truck. Don't wait, don't hesitate." Maya nodded, memorizing the escape routes they'd marked. The plan was simple, but so much could go wrong. Still, having Matthew and Mama Jo's support made her feel stronger. That evening, back at the garage, Maya practiced walking in her new shoes. She'd put the gown on one last time, wanting to feel completely comfortable in it. The repairs were finished, the silk smooth and perfect against her skin. She walked the length of the garage, focusing on keeping her head high and her steps steady. Turn. Walk back. Again and again, until the movements felt natural. Until she felt like herself again. Unknown to Maya, Matthew stood quietly in the doorway, watching. He saw how she squared her shoulders with each turn, how she grew more confident with each step. The scars that marked her face and arms seemed to fade away, overshadowed by the quiet strength in her bearing. In that moment, she wasn't a victim running from her past. She was a warrior preparing for battle. The setting sun painted the garage in shades of gold, catching in Maya's hair and making the ivory silk glow. She paused in her practice to adjust the strap of her shoe, and Matthew could see her hands were steady now, no trace of the trembling that had marked her arrival in Red Mesa just days ago. The desert morning brought with it a warm wind that whistled through the gaps in the garage doors, stirring loose papers and carrying the scent of sage. Maya stood by her workbench, fingers tracing the edge of a small metal box she'd kept hidden since arriving in Red Mesa. Her heart pounded as she watched Matthew checking the oil in a customer's truck. "Matthew?" Her voice was soft but steady. "Can we talk?" He looked up, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Something in her expression made him set his tools down immediately. "Of course." Maya led him to the break room, closing the door behind them. Sunlight streamed through the dusty window, casting long shadows across the floor. She placed the metal box on the small table between them. "You've risked so much to help me," she began, her fingers resting on the box's lid. "You deserve to know what you're really getting involved in." Matthew sat quietly, giving her the space to continue. Maya took a deep breath and opened the box, revealing 3 flash drives nestled in foam padding. "These contain everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Financial records showing how they launder money through legitimate businesses, traffic logs of their drug routes, photos of meetings with corrupt officials." She swallowed hard. "And pictures of what they do to people who cross them." Matthew's eyes widened as he understood the implications. "This is why they're hunting you." Maya nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "I was their bookkeeper. They trusted me because—" She paused, touching her scarred cheek. "Because they thought they'd broken me, but I couldn't keep watching them destroy lives." Matthew reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." "I don't feel brave," Maya admitted. "I feel terrified, but I can't let them keep hurting people." "Listen to me," Matthew said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not helping you out of obligation. I'm standing with you because what you're doing is right." He squeezed her hand. "And because I believe in you." Maya blinked back tears, overwhelmed by his unwavering support. "There's something else," she said. "I need to get this evidence to someone who can use it, someone we can trust." Matthew nodded thoughtfully. "My aunt is Deputy Rain Calderwood. She's been trying to build a case against the gang for years, but they're careful. This could be exactly what she needs." They spent the afternoon planning, speaking in hushed tones while pretending to work on vehicles. Matthew sketched out the safest route to his aunt's house, avoiding main streets where bikers might be watching. "We'll go at dusk," he decided. "Less chance of being noticed." As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Maya and Matthew walked casually toward the residential area of Red Mesa. Maya carried her work bag, the metal box hidden beneath spare parts and tools. Deputy Rain Calderwood's house was a modest single-story home with desert landscaping and security lights. Matthew led Maya to the side door, knocking in a pattern that was clearly familiar between aunt and nephew. Rain opened the door, her sharp eyes taking in Maya's nervous posture and Matthew's protective stance. "Come in," she said quietly, ushering them through the kitchen. Inside, Maya took in the organized space, noting the police scanner on the counter and the maps pinned to a cork board. Rain gestured for them to sit at the kitchen table. "Matthew said you needed help," Rain said directly but kindly. "What's going on?" Maya placed her bag on the table and carefully extracted the metal box. As she explained about the evidence, Rain's expression grew increasingly focused. The deputy examined one of the flash drives, her years of investigative experience evident in her methodical approach. "This is incredibly valuable evidence," Rain said finally, looking at Maya with newfound respect. "But it also makes you a prime target. They'll do anything to keep this from coming to light." "I know," Maya replied, "but I'm done hiding." Rain nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We can use this to set up a sting operation during the gala, but you'll need to trust me completely and do exactly as I say." She leaned forward, her voice serious. "I promise you, I will do everything in my power to protect both of you." They spent the next hour outlining preliminary plans, with Rain taking detailed notes. By the time Maya and Matthew left, night had fallen completely, wrapping the desert town in darkness. Walking back to the garage, Maya felt lighter despite the danger ahead. For the first time since stealing the evidence, she wasn't carrying the burden alone. She had allies now, strong, capable people who believed in her cause. Matthew walked close beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. The warm night air carried the scent of creosote and distant rain, though the sky remained clear and star-filled above them. Back at the garage, Maya secured the door behind them, double-checking the locks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she allowed herself to feel a small measure of hope. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was fighting back. The morning sun painted Red Mesa in shades of amber and gold as the town stirred to life. Maya watched through the garage's grimy windows as workers hung bright banners across Main Street. The annual Brotherhood Gala was transforming the sleepy desert town into a festival ground, though Maya's stomach twisted at the sight of each new decoration. From her position near the back of the garage, she could see delivery trucks dropping off tables, chairs, and elaborate lighting setups. The sound of hammering and shouting workmen drifted through the walls. Occasionally, the rumble of motorcycle engines would make her freeze, her hands gripping whatever tool she was holding a little tighter. Matthew appeared at regular intervals throughout the morning, like a protective clockwork guardian. His first visit came with breakfast, warm breakfast burritos from Mama Joe's wrapped in foil. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the food on a clean workbench. "The diner's getting pretty crowded with early arrivals." Maya accepted the burrito gratefully, realizing she hadn't eaten since the night before. "Thank you. How bad is it out there?" "About 20 bikes so far," Matthew reported, keeping his voice steady. "Mostly advanced groups setting up security. The main crowd won't arrive until tomorrow." Maya nodded, taking small bites of her food. Though her appetite was minimal, she knew she needed to keep her strength up. Matthew stayed while she ate, casually wiping down tools and organizing parts, but she could tell he was really watching the street through the windows. By midday, the temperature had soared, and the garage felt like an oven. Matthew returned with cold drinks and sandwiches, along with news from around town. "They're setting up a stage in the town square," he told her, handing over an icy bottle of water. "Looks like they're planning quite a show." His expression darkened. "Brick Haldeman strutting around like he owns the place." Maya's hand tightened around the water bottle at the mention of Brick's name. "Has he been near the garage?" "No," Matthew assured her quickly. "I made sure to spread word that we're closed for repairs today. Deputy Rain has plainclothes officers watching the area, too." The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maya kept herself busy maintaining tools and organizing parts, but her mind constantly wandered to the metal box containing the evidence, now safely hidden in Deputy Rain's possession. Every distant motorcycle sound made her heart race, even though she knew she was as safe as she could be. Matthew's afternoon visit brought both comfort and concern. "They're stringing up lights all over town," he reported. "Festival starts at sundown tomorrow." He hesitated before adding, "Are you sure about this, Maya? We could find another way." She shook her head firmly. "No, I need to do this. They need to see me standing there, not hiding anymore." As evening approached, the work sounds outside began to fade. The setting sun painted the garage in deep orange light that streamed through the dusty windows. Matthew appeared one final time, carrying 2 paper bags that smelled of Mama Joe's cooking. "Thought we could eat outside," he suggested. "There's a nice spot behind the garage where they've already hung some of the festival lights. Might do us both good to get some fresh air." Maya hesitated, but the thought of sitting in the stuffy garage for another meal made her decision. "Okay," she agreed softly, "but just for a little while." They settled onto 2 old chairs Matthew had positioned beneath strings of white lights that swayed gently in the evening breeze. The spot was sheltered from the street by the garage building, offering privacy while still allowing them to see the desert stars emerging above. "Sometimes I try to imagine what it will be like," Maya said quietly, picking at her food. "After all this is over. If it works." "When it works?" Matthew corrected gently. She gave him a small smile. "When it works. I haven't let myself think about the future in so long. It's strange to even consider it now." "What would you want to do?" Matthew asked, his voice encouraging. "If you could do anything." Maya was quiet for a moment, watching the lights twinkle above them. "I'd like to work with cars properly again, not hiding what I know. Maybe." She hesitated. "Maybe even open my own shop someday." "You'd be good at it," Matthew said with conviction. "I've seen how you work. You have a gift with engines." "What about you?" she asked, turning to look at him. "What do you want for your future?" Matthew seemed surprised by the question. "I guess I haven't thought much about it either. Been focused on the present for a long time." He looked at her thoughtfully. "But lately I've been thinking maybe it's time for some changes." The desert night grew cooler around them as they talked, sharing hopes and fears that had been locked away for too long. Maya found herself opening up about her past. The dreams she'd had before the gang had taken everything away, the small joys she missed, the simple pleasure of feeling safe. "I'll be right there tomorrow night," Matthew promised, as their evening drew to a close. "Whatever happens, you won't be alone." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. "I know," he said softly. "But you're also brave and strong, and tomorrow night everyone else will see that too." They sat in comfortable silence for a few more minutes, watching the stars and listening to the desert night. Finally, Maya stood, knowing she needed to try to rest before tomorrow's challenges. Back in the break room, she carefully removed her wedding gown from its garment bag, laying it across the small bed. The white fabric seemed to glow in the dim light, both beautiful and haunting. Somewhere in the distance, motorcycle engines growled through the night, a sound that once meant terror but now fueled her determination. Maya touched the soft fabric of the gown, tracing the simple elegance of its lines. Tomorrow it would become armor instead of a reminder of loss. Tomorrow she would reclaim not just the dress, but herself. The sunset painted Red Mesa's sky in shades of deep orange and purple as Maya stood before the small mirror in the garage's break room. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the white fabric of her wedding gown. The dress still fit perfectly, its simple elegance a reminder of both what she had lost and what she hoped to reclaim. Mama Jo appeared in the doorway, her eyes misting as she took in the sight. "Oh, sweet child," she breathed. "You look beautiful." Maya managed a shaky smile. "Thank you for everything, Mama Jo. I don't know what I would have done without you these past few days." "Here, let me help you with your hair." Mama Jo stepped forward, gently arranging Maya's dark curls. Her weathered hands moved with practiced care, pinning and adjusting until Maya's hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. A knock at the door announced Matthew's arrival. He wore a clean black suit that made him look both distinguished and slightly uncomfortable. His eyes widened when he saw Maya, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "You look," he started, then cleared his throat. "You look strong." Maya felt warmth spread through her chest at his choice of words. Not beautiful, not pretty, but strong. It was exactly what she needed to hear. The walk to the Red Mesa Convention Hall seemed both endless and too short. The evening air had cooled, and strings of lights twinkled overhead, creating a festival atmosphere that felt surreal given what was about to happen. Maya's new shoes, Matthew's gift, clicked steadily against the pavement as they approached the building. "Remember," Matthew said quietly as they neared the entrance, "I'll be by the exit the whole time. Deputy Rain has the real evidence safely stored. All you have to do is get through your speech." Maya nodded, her throat too tight for words. The convention hall loomed before them, its windows glowing with warm light, the sound of music and voices spilling out into the night. At the entrance, Maya paused, taking a deep breath. Mama Jo squeezed her hand. "You've got this, child. Show them who you really are." Maya straightened her shoulders and stepped through the doors. The effect was immediate and electric. Conversations stuttered to a halt as heads turned, recognition dawning on face after face. The room fell into an unnatural silence, broken only by the soft click of Maya's heels on the polished floor. Through the crowd, she caught sight of Brick Haldeman. His usual smirk froze and fell away as the color drained from his face. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain, even afraid. Maya moved through the crowd with measured steps, her chin held high. The white dress seemed to glow under the hall's lights, transforming her into something ethereal and untouchable. She felt the weight of every eye in the room, but instead of making her shrink, it made her stand taller. When she reached the small stage at the front of the hall, Maya turned to face the crowd. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her voice came out clear and steady. "Good evening," she began. "I want to thank Red Mesa for taking in a stranger and showing her kindness when she needed it most." Her eyes found Mama Jo's encouraging smile in the crowd. "This town has taught me that truth is stronger than fear, and that hope can bloom even in the desert." The silence in the room was absolute. Every face turned toward her. Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. "I stand here tonight not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever felt powerless against those who would use fear as a weapon. The truth always finds its way into the light, and tonight..." A commotion near the back of the room cut her off. Several bikers were converging on Matthew, who had moved from his position by the door. Maya's heart lurched as she saw why. Brick was pushing through the crowd, heading straight for the backstage area. Maya quickly made her way off the stage and behind the curtain, hoping to circle around to the exit, but Brick was already there. He filled the narrow hallway, his bulk blocking any chance of escape. "You stupid girl," he snarled, all traces of his earlier uncertainty gone. "Did you really think you could walk in here and threaten us?" The sound of a scuffle reached them from the main hall. Maya heard Matthew's voice, then a sharp cry of pain that made her blood run cold. "Your boyfriend should have stayed out of it," Brick sneered. He gestured to two of his men who had appeared behind Maya. "Search her." Rough hands grabbed at her, pulling at her dress until they found what they were looking for. The flash drives she had brought as decoys. Brick snatched them, his face twisted with ugly triumph. "Not so brave now, are you?" he taunted, holding up the drives. "These cost you everything once. Already. When will you learn?" Maya's eyes filled with tears, but not from fear. From the sound of Matthew's pain, from the feeling of rough hands on her dress, from the weight of everything that seemed to be falling apart. She twisted away from Brick's men and ran, her white dress flowing behind her like ghost wings in the darkness. She burst out of a side door into the cool desert night, her feet carrying her away from the lights and noise of the convention hall. Tears blurred her vision as she ran, the desert stretching endless and dark around her. Everything had gone wrong. Matthew was hurt because of her. She had brought danger to the people who had shown her kindness. The night swallowed her as she ran, her white dress catching the starlight, her steps faltering as despair overwhelmed her. The desert wind carried the distant sound of motorcycles, and Maya ran faster, feeling like she would never stop running, never find safety, never escape the darkness that seemed to be closing in from all sides. The desert sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, but Maya barely noticed its beauty. She sat behind the garage, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, watching the light creep across the dusty ground. Her wedding dress, now slightly torn and stained, lay crumpled beside her in a white heap. The events of the previous night played over and over in her mind like a broken record. Matthew's cry of pain echoed in her ears, and her stomach twisted with guilt. She had brought this danger to their doorstep, to these people who had shown her nothing but kindness. The morning air was cool, but Maya barely felt it. Her thoughts were a storm of self-recrimination and fear. She should have known better than to think she could stand up to the gang. Should have known they would hurt anyone who tried to help her. "There you are," Mama Joe's voice cut through her dark thoughts. The older woman stood at the corner of the garage, holding a steaming mug of coffee and a paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries. "I've been looking all over for you." Maya didn't respond, just hugged her knees tighter. "Now, don't you dare think about skipping breakfast," Mama Joe said, settling down beside her with a grunt. "I won't have you falling apart on my watch." "I'm not hungry," Maya whispered. "Didn't ask if you were hungry," Mama Joe replied firmly, pressing the coffee mug into Maya's hands. "Drink." The warmth of the mug seeped into Maya's cold fingers. She took a small sip, the rich liquid warming her from the inside out. "Matthew's at the clinic," Mama Joe said quietly. "Nothing too serious, some bruised ribs and a mild concussion. He's been asking about you." Fresh tears welled up in Maya's eyes. "This is all my fault." "Stop that right now." Mama Joe's voice was stern but gentle. "Matthew made his own choices. We all did. You don't get to take that away from us by shouldering all the blame." Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I should see him," she said finally. "I owe him that much." "Eat first," Mama Joe insisted, opening the paper bag and pulling out a warm cinnamon roll. "Can't face the day on an empty stomach." The pastry was sweet and comforting, and though Maya's appetite was non-existent, she forced herself to eat half of it. Mama Joe sat with her in companionable silence until she finished her coffee. Later that morning, Maya walked to the small clinic on Main Street. Her steps were heavy with dread, but she made herself continue forward. The reception area was quiet, with only a sleepy-looking nurse at the desk who directed her to room 103. Matthew lay propped up on pillows, his broad frame making the hospital bed look small. A purple bruise bloomed along his jaw, and his ribs were wrapped tightly. When he saw Maya in the doorway, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart ache. "There's my guardian angel," he said, his voice rough but warm. Maya stood frozen in the doorway, guilt written across her features. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Come here." Matthew patted the chair beside his bed. "And stop apologizing. I knew what I was getting into." Maya moved to the chair, her movement stiff and uncertain. "You could have been killed." "Takes more than a few thugs to take me down," Matthew said, then winced as he tried to shift position. "Though I admit I'm not as young as I used to be." "Why did you do it?" Maya asked, her voice barely audible. "Why risk yourself for me?" Matthew's expression grew serious. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because you deserve better than living in fear. Because," he paused, meeting her eyes, "because I care about what happens to you." His words, so simple and sincere, broke something inside her. Maya covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The day passed slowly, with Maya alternating between visiting Matthew and helping at the garage. But as evening approached, Her resolve hardened. She couldn't stay. Couldn't risk any more harm coming to these people who had become so dear to her. In the growing darkness, Maya packed her few belongings into her car. Her hands shook as she placed the last bag in the trunk. The real flash drives were still safe, hidden where no one would think to look. But that didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except getting far away from here before anyone else got hurt. She was just closing the trunk when headlights illuminated the area. Mama Joe's old pickup truck pulled up, blocking her exit. "Going somewhere?" Mama Joe's voice was calm, but carried a note of steel as she stepped out of her truck. "I have to leave," Maya said, her voice breaking. "I can't let anyone else get hurt because of me." "And you think running away will solve anything?" Mama Joe moved closer, her expression fierce with love and determination. "You think giving up is the answer?" "What else can I do?" Maya cried out. "They won't stop, Mama Joe. They'll hurt everyone I care about." "That's exactly what they want," Mama Joe said firmly. "They want you scared and alone. They want you to run. Running now would give them everything they ever wanted." The truth of Mama Joe's words hit Maya like a physical blow. Her legs gave out, and she would have fallen if Mama Joe hadn't caught her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Let it out, baby," Mama Joe murmured, holding her close as Maya finally broke down completely. "Let it all out. You're not alone anymore." Maya clung to Mama Joe, sobbing into her shoulder as all the fear, guilt, and pain she'd been holding back came pouring out. Mama Joe just held her, rocking slightly, murmuring soft words of comfort as the desert night settled around them. When Maya's tears finally subsided, Mama Joe helped her back to the garage. The break room felt small and safe, a shelter from the uncertainty that lay ahead. Maya sat on the edge of the cot, physically and emotionally exhausted. "Get some rest," Mama Joe said softly, pulling a blanket around Maya's shoulders. "Tomorrow's another day." Maya nodded, too drained to speak. As Mama Joe's footsteps faded away, she lay down on the cot, pulling the blanket tight around her. Sleep wouldn't come easily, but at least she wasn't running anymore. At least she wasn't alone. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Deputy Rain Calderwood's patrol car pulled up to the garage. Maya was already there, mechanically going through the motions of organizing tools, trying to keep her hands busy to quiet her racing thoughts. "Maya!" Rain called out, her voice carrying an unusual note of excitement. "I need to show you something." Maya set down the wrench she'd been cleaning and walked over, her movements cautious. The events of the gala still weighed heavily on her mind. "Look at this," Rain said, pulling out a flash drive. "We examined what Brick took from you at the gala. They're all duplicates, outdated copies you must have made weeks ago." Maya's eyes widened. "What?" "The files are incomplete. They show some suspicious activity, but nothing that would hold up in court." Rain's eyes sparkled. "Which means the real evidence is still out there somewhere." Matthew's voice came from behind them, making them both turn. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame for support, his injured ribs still tender. "Check your toolbox, Maya, the false bottom panel we found last week." Maya rushed to her toolbox, her hands trembling as she released the hidden catch Matthew had discovered during their cleanup after the gala chaos. Inside, nestled in a concealed compartment, lay the original flash drives, untouched and secure. "They're here," she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "They're safe." Mama Joe arrived shortly after, bringing coffee and breakfast burritos for everyone. They gathered around the garage's small break room table, spreading out maps and plans. "The bikers leave tomorrow," Rain explained, pointing to the main highway, routes. "We'll have officers positioned here, here, and here, but we need Brick himself, with evidence of intent." "That's where I come in," Maya said quietly. I'll be the bait." Matthew shifted uncomfortably. "Maya." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "It's the only way. He needs to think he's cornered me, alone and scared." They spent the next hour synchronizing their plan. Rain would coordinate with her officers. Mama Jo would manage communications from the diner. Maya would position herself near the gas station where the bikers would make their final stop before leaving town. 3 short clicks on this radio means you're in position, Rain demonstrated with the device. 2 long clicks means trouble. 1 long click means abort. As the afternoon sun filled the garage with golden light, the others left to make their preparations. Maya stayed beside Matthew, who insisted on remaining at the garage despite his injuries. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams. "I'm scared," Maya admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd be worried if you weren't," Matthew replied, his hand finding hers. "Being brave isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what needs to be done anyway." Maya turned to look at him, really look at him, this gentle giant of a man who had become so much more than just a friendly face in a strange town. "Thank you for everything." "You've got this, Maya," he said softly. "And you've got us. All of us." They spent the rest of the afternoon going over the details again and again, making sure nothing was left to chance. As evening approached, Maya stepped outside the garage alone, needing a moment to center herself. The desert sky was painting itself in deep purples and oranges, the first stars beginning to appear. Maya stood watching the colors change, feeling the weight of tomorrow's confrontation settling on her shoulders. But this time, the weight felt different, not crushing, but grounding. She touched the simple chain around her neck where she'd hidden the flash drive containing the most damaging evidence. Everything she needed to end this was in place. She had a plan, she had backup, and most importantly, she had people who believed in her. Maya took a deep breath of the cooling desert air, her gaze steady on the darkening horizon. "No more running," she whispered to herself. "Time to finish what I started." Dawn crept over Red Mesa with unusual stillness. The morning air hung heavy with anticipation as federal agents, summoned by Deputy Rain's careful coordination, slipped into position around the town's exit routes. Their unmarked vehicles blended seamlessly with the desert landscape, waiting. Maya sat in Matthew's tow truck, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The familiar smell of motor oil and leather couldn't calm her racing heart today. Matthew steered carefully, favoring his injured side but keeping his eyes sharp on the road. "They're following," he murmured, glancing in the rearview mirror. Maya didn't need to look. She could hear the rumble of motorcycles growing closer, Brick and his crew just as planned. They thought she was coming to negotiate, to beg for mercy. They were wrong. The tow truck pulled into the designated spot near the old gas station. Maya stepped out, her boots crunching on gravel. She stood tall, channeling every ounce of strength she'd built during her time in Red Mesa. Brick dismounted his bike, his trademark smirk firmly in place. "Finally came to your senses, huh?" "You could say that," Maya replied, her voice steady and clear. He moved toward her, attempting to use his size to intimidate her as he had so many times before. But Maya didn't back away. She saw now what she couldn't see before. His power was built on fear, and she wasn't afraid anymore. "Now," Rain's voice cracked through the morning air. Federal agents emerged from every direction, weapons drawn. The bikers reached for their own weapons but found themselves overwhelmed in seconds. Brick's face contorted with rage as 2 agents tackled him to the ground, securing his wrists with handcuffs. "You're nothing," he shouted, as they dragged him toward a waiting vehicle. "You hear me? Nothing." Maya watched calmly as her former tormentor was led away, his threats echoing hollow across the desert. Matthew stood beside her, his protective presence steady despite his injuries. Rain approached with the evidence bag, carefully securing the flash drives Maya had protected for so long. "It's done," she said softly. "You did it." The desert fell quiet again, broken only by the sound of vehicle doors closing and engines starting up. Maya felt something shift inside her, the knot of fear she'd carried for so long beginning to unravel. Above them, the morning clouds parted, letting sunshine spill across the landscape. Maya tilted her face toward the warmth, breathing in the sweet air of freedom. The morning sun painted Red Mesa in shades of gold, the air itself seeming lighter after yesterday's events. Mama Joe's diner buzzed with warmth and chatter as locals gathered for a special breakfast celebration. The familiar smell of coffee and fresh-baked biscuits filled the air, while sunlight streamed through the windows. Maya sat at the counter, overwhelmed by the steady stream of townspeople approaching to thank her. Some patted her shoulder, others shared quiet words of gratitude. Their genuine appreciation brought tears to her eyes, happy ones this time. Deputy Rain stood up, tapping her coffee mug with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "I wanted to let you all know that the evidence Maya provided is rock solid. The charges against the gang will move forward quickly. Thanks to her courage, a lot of people are going to see justice." Mama Joe beamed with pride as she set a plate of her famous pancakes in front of Maya. "Eat up, honey. You've earned every bite." After the meal, Maya stepped outside with Matthew into the warm desert morning. A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of sage, and distant mountains shimmered in the heat. "You know," Matthew said softly, "I've seen a lot of things in my life, but nothing as brave as you walking into that gala in your wedding gown, or as beautiful." Maya felt her cheeks warm at his words, touched by the sincerity in his voice. She could see in his eyes that he meant every word. "I've been thinking," he continued, running a hand through his hair somewhat nervously. "The garage needs you. Red Mesa needs you. And maybe I need you too. Would you consider staying? Making this your home?" Maya's heart fluttered as she considered his words. This town that had started as just another hiding place had become so much more. Matthew took a deep breath before adding, "And you know, that gown of yours, maybe someday you might want to wear it again. Not to face down the past this time, but—" He met her eyes hopefully. "Maybe to walk toward a future. With me?" Maya felt tears welling up, but these were different from any she'd shed before. These were tears of joy, of possibility, of love. She smiled up at him, her heart full of certainty as she nodded. Stepping into the golden sunlight, Maya felt truly free for the first time in years. She was loved. She was safe. And finally, wonderfully, she was home. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.